most people hire a audio company. Most people get the band to the show, and the audience, they find their way into the building, into their seats. And, most of the time that happens. But it's always the details that get you. And
Yeah.
and they're also the charm of the event too. Right. And I think that's,
I know that your job is challenging and that you want to find the best possible ways to lead your students to a connected life with Christ. Your job is one of the most important jobs in the world. We want to use this podcast as a way to connect you with the tools that will help you succeed in this ever-changing world that is your youth ministry, helping you to bring the biggest impact possible. Hey, welcome to the Revive Youth Leader Podcast. Hopefully you've been enjoying these video episodes since we started doing this, and you've gotten a lot to gain out of them. Hopefully today will provide some practical value to you as someone who does a bajillion events. I know youth ministry is a lot of event-driven stuff. We find that obviously the in-person stuff is extremely important, but we also do a lot of events, producing those events and stuff. And when we started doing the youth rally, I think it was about 2-3 years in, I started talking to a company called Good Wolf, and I'll let our guest explain that a little bit more later. But I met him through looking for some help in producing a larger event, and we'll continue to work with them because it's been a great experience. They work on the whole experience. And so today I've brought in a friend of mine from their company. His name's Brandon. He's kind of their, I don't know if you want to call him a CEO or whatever, but Brandon's been kind of their production guy, their plan it all, their make it happen guy, and he's here. We're going to talk about what it's like to produce events today. So Brandon's from Austin, Texas, and they do a lot of good stuff there. So Brandon, good to have you, man.
hey, good to have you. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get into this? What is it like working in production and things like that?
Yeah. Background as a musician. Like a lot of folks who get into the events world, you're following your nose, following your passion. For me, that was music. I went to college, Berklee College of Music, for drums, and expanded my vision beyond that into songwriting and producing, and met a whole bunch of super talented people in all different kinds of crafts, and that led me into the music business. I spent about 10 years managing and booking bands. It naturally led into the AVL world, learning about audio production, video, lighting, all the elements that surround a live music experience. And it just keeps growing. And, like you said, the Good Wolf experience, which is our company today, we produce the entire event end to end. And that's just been a kind of a continuation of following my nose and what lights me up and gets me excited and makes me want to, put on a show. I think that's like what keeps bringing me back to the table each time. Every event's different. It's a totally different experience for a different group of people with a different group of artists and venue, totally different venue, different, crew on each show. And, I just love it. I feel like it's a new day every day.
That's awesome.
And, it's kind of how I think about it. Yeah.
You said
the music too.
You said it's like there's something about like putting on a show, and I just think about every time I've ever done an event, more than just production for church, but like putting together an event for a special weekend or whatever, young adult rallies, youth rallies, different conferences, things like that. And there's like this moment, right, when you start to get everything is kind of set and everything's in place, and it's just like almost like peace when you're waiting for this thing to go, and you just kind of look at what has come together. And I don't know, I at least get this as kind of like this awe experience, like, wow, look at this.
I couldn't begin to speak to what it's like to be a pastor. I just look up to the pastor, because even being at Revive was a reminder of just how much intention goes into, and studying and preparation goes into what you're there to what I'm there to learn, what I'm there to experience. But yeah, I totally get the detail of curation it takes to put on a church service, or give a sermon, or put on a youth rally. It's a lot. It doesn't come together naturally. It takes somebody pooling resources and intention.
Yeah.
Hats off to you.
I remember, I mean, when I first started doing youth events, it was, 16 years ago, we started doing a youth event at another church I was at in South Carolina. And we were trying to think of everything that we had to do, and just like put together this kind of, almost like, if you'd have it, a checklist, and kind of just, try to think of everything. Inevitably, we'd get there and get things going, and it'd just be like, man, I forgot this. You'd be scrounging last minute to do something, or you're like, oh, I wish we had done that. We talked about that. We never did it. And we put together like a checklist that's like 5 miles long of stuff, and you'd still inevitably forget things and whatever. And it was interesting because when we first worked together to produce Revive, we were planning on producing, I think it was like 2019 when we first started talking. And then, of course,
right,
COVID kind of disheveled that, and we had already been playing. But when we started talking, and you were kind of like, tell me what you have, and we kind of like laid it out, and you were like, this is good, but you were like, hey, we've got this kind of process that we go through to make sure that everything is covered. And I thought I had a good handle on that stuff, and according to what you've told me, unless you're just trying to blow smoke, which I kind of didn't get from you, but it was like, you were like, yeah, I think you guys actually have done a pretty good job of getting things together. But it was like, always like, I felt like there was something we've missed, so, and I know anybody listening to this put on an event has kind of been there. Is that your experience, like putting on an event? Like a lot of people you come across, they always miss stuff.
It's always the details, it's, I always say to our staff, it's the devil and the charm are in the details.
Yep.
Most people get the venue. Most people hire a audio company. Most people get the band to the show, and the audience, they find their way into the building, into their seats. And, most of the time that happens. But it's always the details that get you. And and they're also the charm of the event too. Right. And I think that's really, if we bid on probably 5 times as many shows as we actually end up producing, and the ones that haven't seemed to get the basic building blocks of their concept down, or the basic pieces, this events are probably not going to happen, because it's just, but no matter who it is really, and how good they are at producing an event, I can probably go around and find some holes and cracks, and those are the details, right? And like, those are the things that everybody notices in the end. And it's everything from, you walk up to you go to a wedding, right? And the first thing you do is sign the guest book. Well, like, somebody forgot to put a pen. There you go. Like, it's such a small detail. The whole thing was pointless without that detail covered. Yeah. Or you walk up and it's a really nice pen, and it's like, oh, that was such a nice touch. That pen felt so good. It had a little feather sticking out. Who knows, right? It's like those kinds of things. But it's also like, we do a lot of festivals, right? Outdoor events. Okay. You've got to think through the contingency plan just as thoroughly as you do plan A. When plan B comes around, that can't be the one that just got thrown together, because that's the event that everybody's going to, and there's a lot to do on the contingency planning front too. Anyways, I feel like it really does just come down to the details. Yeah. And we have a process. I think that's something I've learned, the difference between somebody who puts on their own events versus a company that puts on events for a lot of different groups all over the country, all over the everything from a Revive Youth Rally, and the next weekend we're at a real estate conference, and the next weekend we're throwing somebody's 80th birthday party, and very different events. Everyone's different. The process is sort of our insurance policy to say, hey, we're going to run this 100-point checklist on every single event. Realistically, what it ends up being is it's like a 7-phase process where every step of the way there's certain things that need to be done by certain deadlines to keep it on track. And that's what really allows me and my team the opportunity to scrutinize the details and not just show up to the show and be running around like crazy trying to snuff out all the fires and sweep everything under the rug that you don't want to be seen.
Yeah, I know I felt like for a few years, more so early on, but I did feel like when an event would happen, I just spend all my time putting out fires. So I get that. And I know anybody that's even, whether it's a small event or a large event, often when you haven't been through that process before, it seems like that's kind of what you're doing. You end up being the guy that's putting out fires the whole time. I even remember one time when we were doing a youth rally, not Revive, but it was called Alive, years ago. My creativity there, Alive, Revive, not a whole lot of different. Anyway, but I remember we would actually tell someone to be like our bounce person. Like, I don't know what you would call them, but like, so people would go to that person so that they wouldn't come to me, and that person could decide if it was worthy of my time or not. But anyways, I was thinking about this, about, our experience together and working with you guys to produce Revive. What kind of an experience was that for you? Like, what was it like for you to put on this large church concert event and compared to what, I know you guys do a lot of different stuff, and even your owner of your company, he used to be a youth pastor, so he
right.
gets that experience. But what was it like? What was different about producing Revive?
Yeah, it was inspiring for me. I wouldn't say all of our events are inspiring for me personally, but that one was. Part of my background. I grew up in the church. That's how I got introduced to music, was through the church. Playing worshipful music, and I was saved at a conference just like this, a youth rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I'll never forget it. It was a point in my life where the whole trajectory changed, and I felt like I had a hub in the center of my life that was not me and my personal ambitions.
Awesome.
So I feel like I had some purpose I understood the purpose of this event, and it meant something to me personally. And then also you have to think about the timing of when we actually did get to do the Revive Youth Rally. We were coming out of the pandemic, and that was such a confusing time for everybody. And I can't imagine anybody more confused and maybe disheartened than kids who were in their high school, maybe college era. Like, what is this world that I'm about to enter into? I feel like I haven't really had a fair shot at getting on the runway here. And where is God in all of this? I think those kinds of questions were in everybody's head and heart at the time. And again, I feel like the conference was a fire hose of hope and inspiration for a lot of people. And it was definitely that for me. I very specifically remember standing, at my post, running the stage or whatever I was doing at the time. And Mac Brock was up there. Mac Brock was one of our worship leaders from Elevation Worship. And he was telling a story about a kid who he met in the hospital. And at that time, his his prognosis was not looking good. And then he said, he's standing right here in front of me right now with his hands up in the sky. And we prayed for that. And here it is, and I just like start like weeping,
Yeah.
like trying to hold my composure. And I thought, God, that is like, there it is, like living proof for me and everybody around me that, and I needed that so badly, I needed that so badly in my life at the time. And I just looked around and thought, wow, this is an incredible, very important event to be happening right now. And I mean, for me, that's obviously very personal, but I can't imagine everybody in the building didn't have some type of an experience like that. It was immersive also, it was not a in and out evening concert. It was multiple days of workshops and concerts and speaking and, communing over meals together and sleeping and waking up and you're back in it again. And, like, I just think that type of an immersive experience is transformative. And even for myself on the crew, I would testify that it was.
That's
and
awesome.
It was lighthearted and fun and easy, like it wasn't, I didn't feel like the Bible thumping condemnation thing, which, like some conferences might have a tone of that. That was not Revive. This was like, I feel like it lived to the name Revive.
That's awesome. It's interesting is I went and visited that same kid in the hospital as Mac Brock did. I didn't know that they had visited each other till like a while later. And crazy enough, that kid that was at the youth rally, like he wasn't a kid anymore. He's a young adult. He actually has been on this podcast as a pastor and one of our guests. Like, just crazy things happen, man. Crazy things happen. So yeah, it's such a good thing. And I mean, I had heard his side of that story, but I didn't know. Sometimes you think like famous people, like Mac Brock or whatever, like they're not going to remember stuff like that. And then when they do, and they say that was cool and that impacted them, like, that's just so awesome, and you don't get experiences like that out of being involved with stuff like this and producing things like this. And it's just cool to see. And if you want to use these words, and I'm not this kind of person, but the reality is it's almost like, it's like magic, right? Like, it's like, how does God orchestrate these moments to happen? And I think it's through us being willing to put on events like this that allow God to move. And sometimes I'll go, man, this is so much work to raise this much money or to do this or to make all this happen. It's so much work, and it's a challenge. And sometimes you're in the stress and you're in the moment and you're like, is this really worth it? And then you hear stories like that and you're like, absolutely, it's worth it. There are these little moments that impact at different small groups or Wednesday night teen thing or whatever. But there's something that happens at these Catalyst events that's just so cool. And, so I want to just challenge anybody that's listening to this. If you've not put on some sort of rally, and it can be for 12 people. It can be like, we were planning originally for the youth rally that year to be like 1,200 people. And COVID kind of threw a wrinkle. We had like 300 and some, which was not anywhere near what we expected. But it was still such a powerful weekend. And you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what God's going to do out of that. But the cool thing is producing an event and putting on these events, the change can be unreal. So here we are, talking in the Revive Youth Leader podcast, and I kind of want to encourage other youth leaders to do this kind of stuff. And so the reason, I wanted to have you on was to kind of say, hey, what does it look like? What do you do? Like, if you never produced your first event, like, what does that look like from your perspective? What should someone, I mean, obviously not everybody could pay you guys to do that. Some could. I would say it was completely worth the investment, honestly. Like, you guys made my life so much easier, and the event came together so much smoother than I had hoped. So it was super good. I was so glad that we were able to work with you guys, and we'll work with you in the future, I know. But for anyone that's starting out, maybe your first event, maybe you've had events and not have success, where do they start? What do we do?
Yeah. Well, start small. Start small. I remember when I was first getting into the events world, I was inspired by large events, so I wanted to put on a large event, and I went to a event producer that owned a big property, and I said, "Hey, I have an idea for a festival that I can put on here." And she heard the idea, and at the end she said, "That's a great idea." Well, great. Can we do it? Absolutely not. Why not? And she said, "Because you don't know how much toilet paper you need. And if you did an event of that size and you were wrong about the amount of toilet paper you needed, you might have spent all your profit on toilet paper or not had enough toilet paper for your guests, and you would have ended up with a really crappy situation. And I'm just not going to nudge you to get into that. Why don't you
That's
go do
awesome.
some events for, 30 people? See how that goes, do then maybe up to 100, maybe up to a couple hundred people." And I know that you did that, that was not your first rodeo. You put
Yeah.
on events, and, anybody who's a youth pastor is putting on an event every time you get those kids together,
Yeah.
and church, as a pastor, you're getting your congregation together. So, but yeah, first thing is start small. I think that's an easy nudge. And right within that, I would say, aside from the logistics of that, this is again like kind of leaning on my personal experience, but also go to much larger events too, and see and experience that, and know that for me, the magic happens in the small group setting, right? Like the every Thursday youth group meeting was where I was connecting with my peers and where I was getting mentorship from, the young adults who were older than me and their parents. And, that was where it really happened. We went and had a mind-blowing, heart-exploding spiritual awakening at a conference like Revive, and then went back to the hotel room with my 8 people, and so I just want to really validate that it does not need to be big. It can be, like the magic really happens in those more intimate settings. But also going to a conference like this is something that brings everybody together. You create these lasting memories and transformative experiences together. So I want to nudge the youth pastors who are thinking about starting their own event or their own Thursday night worships, whatever that ends up being, to also continue going to the bigger events. But, also just to get tactical, I'd speak to our, this is Good Wolf's process. Like I said, it's a 7-phase process. And phase 1 is what is feasible, and if I got to be a, shrewd, the first question I would ask is, what's your budget? Like, do you have any money to throw at this thing? Because if not, then there's probably nothing that Good Wolf can do about it, but it also helps scale it, So another angle is if you're not sure what the budget is, or if you think you can pull people into it to create a much larger budget than you have, then okay, so what's the vision, right? But that whole feasibility phase is, I actually borrowed that from an architect when my wife and I were we wanted to make an addition on our house, and everybody wants an addition on their house, but not everybody can afford it. What I learned through the process is they said, okay, well, right now you're going to pay us $1,200 and we're going to do a feasibility study. And it showed me that, well, there's certain trees that are, protected, that are preventing you from building the house in the way that you want to. But you could build it in this other way, and that whole feasibility phase is really important because it's before anybody's under contract. It's before any money's spent. For Good Wolf, our feasibility phase is kind of a pro bono shot for us to learn the vision and what the budget and parameters are for the event. But for the client, it's kind of a reality check of like, do you know what you're signing up for here? Because let's make sure we know before we engage and go into that.
It's kind of the, do you have enough toilet paper?
Yes, it is that is really what it should be called. Do you know how much toilet paper you need for this event?
I love that, man. I do. I really do. At some point, you're going to hear that. Somebody's going to hear that in a sermon come out of my mouth that, like, you're planning to have God move, but do you have enough toilet paper?
It's an honest question to be asking.
So good, though. So
Uh,
good. Yeah.
and I mean, I can't tell you how many events I go to. We went to a festival last weekend, 5 portalets, one had toilet paper in it, and I just am like, yep, yep, it's the details. It's always the details.
Yeah. So you start in this kind of investigative phase, whatever you want to call it, and
Yeah.
then where do you go from there?
So the second phase is development. So okay, feasibility got us to a quote that shows a dollar amount and a scope of what that dollar amount includes. I have quotes for a few $1,000s. I have quotes that are well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars and cresting $1 million. So events
You know
can be
what's
huge, events
interesting
can be small.
is one of the things that got me to talk to you guys was a quote. I'd already booked our venue, which I wish I hadn't. I wish I had to talk to you guys first, honestly. But I booked the venue and then I started looking for production side, but like the AVL side, and I got a quote from their in-house guys, and it was like 3 times what I thought I was going to be at, and I was like, oh no, what do I do? And I was talking to
Yeah.
a buddy who used to work really closely with your owner, and he put me in touch with you guys, and that was a big eye opener. So yeah, absolutely, like,
I mean, right on, right on. And I think sometimes you can get excited and you're just like, let's just get a venue and the rest will come together around that. And I think one of the things that we learned from that first year with Revive was, man, the venue hamstrung us on so many
oh
different
man,
points. And
yeah,
that's not to say that it wasn't a great venue. It just wasn't the right venue for that event
yeah,
that year, right? And I mean, we could talk for the rest of this podcast about why, but that's part of what that feasibility study is to discover. Like,
yeah,
okay, we're going to define what are the right qualities of a venue. And just to put one example on the table to have some concrete evidence, we were at the Charlotte Convention Center, which has a giant 4,000 some capacity ballroom. It's not really designed for a live music experience.
yeah,
And so, to Ryan's point, now you're paying, you're getting quotes from the in-house production company that's, a couple $100,000 extra to bring in all of this production to support what we want to do. So now we're going to find external third-party vendors, and every step of the way on that event, there was kind of this gnawing in the back of my mind, like, if we had done this event at a venue with in-house production, it would have saved a lot of money, time, headache, and the building would have been designed, would have been more supportive to the acoustics of what was happening, and just 100 different things that we could talk about. But that venue piece is a really, really important one. And, when we start the next planning for Revive or really any event, I love when Good Wolf gets to engage before any contractors are confirmed, because we can qualify what the right contractor is for that event, and the venue is a perfect example of that.
yeah, yeah.
But so to kind of continue that, the development phase is, okay, we actually have a scope. We've already looked at what's feasible. We are already, Good Wolf knows what your vision is. You have a much clearer written down understanding of what your vision is and what it's likely to cost. For outdoor events, there's a contingency plan. There's, margin built in around everything so that you don't end up going way over your head because of things we didn't see coming. Development is really the process of just diving into the next layer of that plan. Okay, so now let's talk about the detailed run of show timeline. What kinds of bands do you want to have performing? Not just how many, but let's hone in on who those artists are, what their production needs are. When we booked Leland was one of the headliners for that year. They had a pretty very reasonable, but they have a tech rider and a hospitality rider. Okay, that's going to affect the amount of money. Let's make sure that doesn't change anything. There were other bands that we looked at that we thought were the right band, and then they were, cost prohibitive, or their rider required things that we didn't have the ability to deliver on. So that development phase is almost like kind of a double check to make sure that what we said we want to do is right. And all of that happens before we lock down, the deposit or contract. It's still, we're moving in the direction of confirming. And that's really our third phase. If you think of it in the, how does this keep running down the funnel of becoming an event? Our third phase is confirming. So confirming means, okay, sign contract, not just between our client and Good Wolf, but also between Good Wolf and every vendor that we need. It is locked down. Everything's contracted. All the deposits have been placed. We have an event. The confirming phase is really the point where we can give you the green light. When we say this event is confirmed, that is the green light for activating, marketing, promotion, PR, and activating your advertising, launching the ticketing campaign, all of those things. And I think that's another area where some event producers get in over their head. They're so eager to get tickets on sale and get the marketing promotion machine going that they kind of sign themselves up for something they can't deliver on. Or worse yet, they realize later, though, they have to make a change, and now it changes the ticket price, or it changes the location, or now you're like chasing a ghost with all of the, with your marketing and advertising and promotion, and people are getting confused. So having those ducks lined up in the right order is a really important piece, and that's part of the process.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, I've worked with booking artists before myself, like for other events, and even with contracting the ones when we had to cancel in COVID before you guys got on the scene. I'd already had a few contracts worked out, and having you guys to work that out for me was so much better. That made my life 1,000 times easier. Just being able to go, yeah, this is who I want, and you guys went in and negotiated, and we're like, oh, this is going to work, that's not going to work, whatever. That was such a good process, and I was so happy to have you guys on board. When I think back about it, I remember seeing the percentage of what it was going to cost to have you guys work with me, and there was a little bit of sticker shock, and you guys even you made it more possible for me, but when I look back at it and all the ways that you helped and made it I'm like, that was totally worth it. Like, absolutely, that was worth it.
I love to hear that. Because what I think Greg, our CEO, he's really the one who taught me this, but there's a balance of value and cost, right? Mm-hmm. And we always want to just know how much is it going to cost, right? And then that's where the sticker shock comes in. But the sticker shock is usually in absence of the value of what you're paying for. That's the difference, right? So when the value goes up, the price point comes down. The perception of the price point comes down. And that's, I think, what you're really speaking to, is that once you saw everything that we do for the amount that we charge, the value is well worth the cost. And at the beginning, when you just see the price point, you're like, well, I could call this agent and do the deal and, avoid that whole fee, as a percentage of whatever the talent is. And when you're booking bands that cost, up to $10,000, that any percent on that starts to seem like a lot, right? Yeah. If all we were doing was brokering a deal with a band to play an event that Good Wolf had nothing to do with, I don't know that we would even really get involved much. I mean, we have clients that book, hundreds of bands a year. And okay, so we're a high volume transaction thing, take some weight off their plate, different deal. But for something like this, the places where we bring a lot of value is, it's that end-to-end process. The agents really trust us because we're not just brokering the deal. We are the point of contact all the way through show day. Mm-hmm. And they know that they can trust us because we are also the one producing the event. We had the deposit immediately. When they were booked, they immediately got paid. The contract was signed and redlined in the appropriate areas. We did the negotiation. I've been booking bands for 20 years, so I've yet to see something that's blown me away that we couldn't negotiate out through simple redlining. But then also the immediate next thing. Okay, the band needs to coordinate their travel. They need to coordinate their production. They need to coordinate their lodging. They need to coordinate hospitalities, and it's just done. It's turnkey. One thing that's, Good Wolf, we learned early on is that when we get bigger contracts, bigger artists, keynote speakers, and headline talent, they require roadies basically to load and carry their gear for them. Yeah. So we just instituted a policy that we carry musicians' gear on every event, no matter what it is, and it makes us just that much more willing and eager and amiable to carry the gear for the people who require it. And for the bands who have never had their guitar amps carried for them, they're just like, wow, this is like some kind of luxury service.
Yeah, you're treating me like gold.
Right. And then what I learned out of that, is they are very appreciative of the crew, which our crew does not usually get. It's not, I don't think it's a common thing that people go out of their way to like really thank and congratulate the crew on a great show, and they get that from the artists, and it's reciprocated. There's just this mutual respect. And then of course those bands get on stage and they're well fed and they were well taken care of, and they just perform better. Like they're in a better mood. They are connected to why they're there. Our crew makes sure that they meet all the right people, from the sound engineer to the MC to the, they're connected to the purpose of the event. And I just found that like that artist care piece is something that I've always done naturally, as a musician. They're my brethren. Yeah. But also it's become part of our culture to do that. And, by the time you stack all of that up and you look at the percentage, you're like, okay, yeah, that's kind of a no brainer. Yeah. And you don't know what you don't know, and that's the one that, the bullet that gets you is the one you didn't see coming, right? And I think when you get into booking a band, you don't realize how many details surround that that could end up like impacting that artist's experience at the event, and ultimately the guest's experience at the event when the artist gets up there and is just kind of like given they're not playing their best, and you can tell. So I think all of that wraps up into that value piece. And, I love that the price point was validated by the end of the event.
It's funny too, because even just in this conversations, there's so many memories coming back to my head too. Like even, your team was so good to work with. Like I had my volunteers were like, man, you need to bring them back in, because their people were so good to work with. And that was super cool experience too. Because sometimes, like roadies are not the dude that's like, hey, whatever, or whatever. But your whole team was so good to work with. But interestingly enough, it brought up a memory too of how we had one guy, and we changed what we're going to do in the future because he had more access than he should have, and he was bothering one of the band members, and you guys had to kind of get in the way there and deal with that, and it kept me from having to do that. Right. And so that was valuable to me. But it was just so funny that it brought that back up to memory, like this guy kind of bugging one of the band members, and we had to step in because it makes the band's experience better as well. You don't want the band to be like, oh, they let these people just kind of bother me the whole time. I've always thought along too, like with speakers, when I'm invited to go speak somewhere and I speak and they don't, I'm not a prima donna. I don't need a bunch of stuff, but they don't do anything extra. Like, you just arrive and you got to get your own rental car and you got to do all this stuff yourself, and you show up and you got to get your own room and all this kind of thing. There's nothing taken care of in the room, and you leave and there's not really a thank you or anything. But, you know, the way that you guys did it, and what I've always tried to do is make sure that in the green room there's special stuff for them or things like, and those little details go a long way for people wanting to come back. Yeah.
So. Does. Yeah. You know, another thing that, well, I would just say that we do very intentionally is, it just like Good Wolf hires based on attitude first. Like, whatever the skill set or experience that particular person brings to the table, it's secondary to their attitude. Yeah. And I think that's something that really lacks, especially in the production space. You know, like a lot of the production guys are kind of loner outcasts. They're their own little pack of wolves that they get each other, and everybody else is the weirdos. And what's really lacking is like basic customer service and a positive attitude. So we really, really push not just push it. We hire based on that. You know, we based on, is this the kind of person that we're going to have to explain why you should be thinking in a customer service way all the time, you know, like no matter what your job is that day. You know, I think that's one piece of the puzzle. And then the other thing too is just you know, even when we're not hired as the event producer, we might be hired for audio, or you might be hired for talent buying, or for our ticketing platform, or, you know, any of these kind of smaller subcontracted services. You're still working with a company that thinks like an event producer, and that really starts with, okay, so what's the purpose of this event? What are we trying to do? Why are we bringing all these people together? You know, how are you as the event producer, you know, the bride on your wedding day, you know what you expect and what you want. Our expectation is that we deliver that for you. And I think having those expectations clear and documented up front gives us the ability to relay that to our team too. And they get it on some level, not at probably the highest level that you do, probably not at the level that I would understand it being in those early conversations, but they understand the purpose of why we're there. Yeah. And once you have that, you don't have to train on every little thing, and you don't have to have like, you know, this daisy chain of a million escalation points of, hey, what do we do here? What do we do about this? What do you do about this? Like, people just kind of get it. Like, oh, kind of looks like that guy's annoying the band. Do I need to just snuff that fire out, or should I ask somebody, you know, first? And there were some situations that I think we did put in front of you to make the decision on. And then there was probably a lot of things that happened at that conference that you just didn't have to hear about. And you just probably on the back end got to maybe hear about it, maybe not. That it was just handled, you know, one thing you didn't have to think about that day. And I would credit a lot of that to our team's attitude and their get it factor. Yeah. You know, just.
So you have this, you know, we talked a little bit about the process. We could go through it all. I don't think we really need to. People are getting the idea. I think they'll get the idea of what it looks like, and you guys can take that through that if they decide to work with you or whatever, or if not, hopefully they're getting a view of what it looks like to put on an event. One of the things I wanted to ask you, I mean, you've been involved with all different kinds of events. You know, you guys put on stuff at massive shows and you put on smaller events and whatever. Is there something that kind of sticks out to you as like, this is probably one of the most important things for any event to have? What is that?
I think if I had to boil it down to one word, it would be experience. You know, I mean, that is what an event is. That's what everybody at the event has in common. When we, you know, as Good Wolf started out as a talent agency, so we were called Good Wolf Entertainment for a long time, but we recently rebranded under the name The Good Wolf Experience. And we started to realize that really is a differentiating factor, no matter what we're being hired to do, is that we are really scrutinizing the experience that we're creating. And everybody's been to events, a lot of events, or some events, or one event that's sticking out to you right now. And you've been to good events and bad events, and great events and horrible events, and there's like this kind of common understanding of what an event experience is. And I think that is the part that we focus in on the most. Is it's not just what the client wants, but then thinking beyond that to, okay, well, who are their stakeholders? Okay, well, they have a board, they have sponsors, they have attendees, ticket buyers, they have VIPs, they have GA, there are artists involved in this event. There is the crew, the production crew. There's a venue. I mean, you go into a venue like the Charlotte Convention Center, they have events like that every week. They're churning events through. That is a very rigid, formal structure that we have to snap into to be a good guest in their house and play by all the rules, right? And so how was the Charlotte Convention Center's experience of this event? And I think that word experience is number one on the thing that I just try to keep in the central focus, because it can tend to float to the back of your mind when you just go into, oh, did I pay the deposit on time? Did I get did I do this, that, and the other thing that are the front of mind type things? You can pretty easily lose focus of what is the experience. So I think that's another thing that you can really not just start with is like, what is the arc of this event experience? What's the point where somebody has a transformative, heart opening, spiritual transformation at this event? At what point do we think that's going to happen? Is it, within the first hour? Probably not. Is it the very end? Maybe it's somewhere in the middle, well then, like, what is it that creates that? Is it music? Is that, okay, music's part of it. But it's also what's being said. And, I think there's a lot that you can pour into the experience cup to shape that, and then just keep bringing it back around. One of the things that, when we're on site for an event, Good Wolf has this process. We call it our event day production phase breakdown, which is like there's phases within the event day, and loading in the production, loading in the artists, then loading in all the people, and then the event's over. Now you load all the people out and load all the artists and load all the production out. Within that simple framework of understanding how you get all the people in and out of an event, we have a huddle every time we're at the end of one phase going into the other. It's an opportunity to bring that team together and kind of remind them why we're here. Yes, you do have to go pick up the cup that was left on stage over there, but also remember why we're doing that. Because we want that to be, there's a lot of purpose behind that. And I really do feel like it keeps coming back to, we are there to create an experience for people, and it's that can be a year-long process.
Well, I remember specifically, and I don't think I expected this or whatever, but at some point we scheduled a walkthrough with you guys of the convention center months out before the event, and we walked through, and there was stuff that I'd walked through there several times. I had gone and prayed around the building and stuff like this, and they're probably like, who's this weirdo walking around our building? But anyways, But when we scheduled the walkthrough, we're going through there, and you guys were like, okay, where is the people coming in? What is their experience as they go up the stairs, and what is the first thing they see? And you were like, you know, what is it when they first walk in the room, or what is it like when they, you know, let's say the artist has to travel from the stage through this back area. What's that experience going to be like for them? And, you know, stuff that I just probably would never have considered, but you guys were asking those questions, and it was so good because, one, you know, it helped me think not just what is my experience as a leader or what is Mac Brock's experience going to be, but, you know, also we analyzed what is the person attending, what are they going to feel, what is it going to be like when they come up, and they, you know, I think it's easy when you're planning an event to miss that and go just who's the speaker, who's the musician, but, you know, you really want to lead people to the best experience they can have, and from a church perspective, the best experience that they can have with God, and that takes out interruptions and it adds in high points and all those kind of things. So, yeah.
that walkthrough. I mean that building. It's just another example that the green room was about a 5-minute walk down a maze of a corridor to get to side stage to be on stage. So, you know, that was we had to think through, and even getting in the building, there was a freight elevator at a loading dock that took you through a long corridor. It was very easy to get lost in there, and musicians and speakers who are already experiencing some level of performance anxiety, and then they might get lost in the gallows of this convention center.
Listen, I remember one time one of the artists forgot something, and I was like, and I had to run and try to get it to them because they were leaving, and I was like trying to run through this maze in the back to go find them, and I almost got lost. I was like, which aisle do I turn down? It was crazy.
But you see those things coming, and then we were able to solve for it. We had security escorts, we had walkie-talkies, we set up a side stage green room in addition to the actual green room that was so far away. And, you know, once you see where those things are at and you see how bad that could be, you're able to just snap in some very logical solutions that, you know, and then it wasn't so bad. You know, it was actually really nice. You're like, okay, you go hang out over there, have your conversation, your warm up, your rehearsals, and then we'll have you here 10 minutes before you walk on stage. And then you can literally see what's happening on stage, hear, feel the audience, you know, get into the space of it, and then walk on stage. And, you know, I feel like that was just another example of how at that event, it was all the pre-planning and thinking about, okay, wow, this could really be a problem.
Well, and you know, out of anyone, especially you're a musician, you know that who's going to be lost late before when they should be there on time, but the bass player or, you know, some random, like, so, but it was good, that you guys were keeping track of all that stuff and whatever. Anyways, I think, you know, I think that hopefully this is giving everyone some kind of insight into what it's like to plan an event, thinking through the details, what the experience, what is it going to be like, you know, what are we missing, what are we catching, do a walkthrough, all these kind of things. And so, but I would encourage everybody, hey, you know, deal with the small stuff, have those smalls, but also create other experiences. And if you can't, look for other conferences that are creating those experiences, you know, whether it's some big conference in Montana or it's, you know, Revive near Charlotte or whatever, you know, but take advantage of those things because somebody's going through those steps. In the same light, you know, I just want to say, and I will put your information out on the YouTube and the podcast and all this kind of stuff. But if someone's like, hey, listen to this, like, man, I was planning this event, I'm lost, or I'm going to plan this event, I'm lost, and they want your help, they want Good Wolf's help, I highly recommend you guys after working with you. But how does someone find you guys? How does someone reach out to you guys or connect with you guys?
It's very, very simple. You can go to our website, goodwolflive.com. It's the same thing on all of our socials. Type in instagram.com/goodwolflive. Good Wolf Live will get you there. you can send an email to hello@goodwolflive.com. That will get you to probably directly to me pretty quickly, if not somebody else who can answer whatever questions you have on the front end. But, again, like that feasibility part of our process is something that we'll do pro bono just to get to know you and what kind of events that you're thinking of having. It's an integral part of our business development process. So, for the folks who are actually thinking about planning an event and not sure if they want to do it, just pick up the phone, send an email, drop us a line, and we'll have a pretty informal exploratory chat, 30 minutes on Zoom call. And at the very end, even if you don't end up going forward with Good Wolf, you probably end up getting something out of that call that'll steer you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember specifically our first conversation, whatever, and I was like, man, I don't know if I need them to help me book the band. I can do that kind of stuff. And sure enough, I could have. But the reality is that you guys made it simpler. You made it easier. It was a joy to work with you guys on those things. And now looking forward, like I'm going, at first you guys were only kind of partially involved. The next time we do Revive, we're going to go back to a little smaller scale and then build it back up to larger again. But I'm going to get you guys in the process right from the beginning because I know how much better things will be and how much easier it will be on me because of that. But yeah, check them out, goodwolflive.com. Find their socials, whatever. They're super experienced. They've done stuff in the church space, outside of the church space, in the corporate space, and concert spaces, South by Southwest, all these different things. So, it's been good conversation, good catching up with you guys. I'm looking forward to when we can start moving forward with Revive again. But this has been awesome, Brandon. Thank you, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too.
Yeah, it's been good. So, check in with them if you need a conversation. And like you said, they do it free the first, that initial conversation. Trust me, it's valuable. Go and do it. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed the Youth Rally, the Revive Youth Leader podcast this week. I hope it's been insightful and informative, and I hope we've equipped you for what you can do moving forward. And it's been awesome catching up with you, Brandon. It's been good to talk more about production and stuff and just bring up some fun memories and whatever. I hope this has been a blessing to everyone and that you're equipped for more. As always, just have a great one and lead some more young people to Christ.